one of the meanings of the word svadhyaya, self-study, which we usually translate as self-study, on its very primary level is chanting. That is how the word svadhyaya is many times explained by the commentators, the Sanskrit commentators, and also translated into Chinese when Chinese translations were prepared of Indian texts. In yoga, chanting is seen as a form of austerity on the level of words, on the verbal level. So it's given a lot of importance because one of the best things that it does, it really allows the teachings to settle down in the mind when we repeatedly chant them. That is the idea behind chanting these mantras. Every time we sit down to study them, that is the idea behind chanting the Yoga Sutras. So the discussion that we were having when studying this last Śānti Mantra, the middle three sentences of which sarvaṁ brahmaupaniṣadaṁ, translated as all is Brahman of the Upanishads, then māhaṁ brahma nirākuryāṁ, may I not negate Brahman, and mama brahma nirākarod, may Brahman not negate me. These three sentences are pledges that are rooted in the three core ideas of yoga. Karma yoga, action as a means of meditation. Bhakti yoga, devotion as a means of meditation. And jnana yoga, knowledge as a means of meditation. We have already discussed jnana yoga, the sentence of jnana yoga, and in the last two classes we discussed the sentence on karma yoga, which was the last sentence that we have studied in our previous session. Māhaṁ brahma nirākuryāṁ, may I not negate Brahman. And this is a pledge that involves karma yoga for two reasons, which I gave at the end of my previous session, that negation or acceptance can only be expressed in actions, whether they are physical actions, verbal actions, or mental actions. But negation and acceptance is to manifest themselves in action. That is one reason why this part of the mantra is related to karma yoga. The second reason is that it speaks of effort on the part of the sadhaka, on the part of the practitioner. May I not negate. So may I make the effort to not negate but accept that universal consciousness, the presence of that universal consciousness. So it's effort on the side of a practitioner, on the side of the devotee. That's why it is karma yoga. Now, the next sentence, may Brahman not negate me. Here he is praying for effort after himself making effort and making tremendous effort, because karma yoga is about making tremendous effort, as we saw in the past two sessions. now effort from the side of the divine is being talked about, which manifests in the form of what we can call in English grace. But I will come back to this idea from Sanskrit by analyzing the Sanskrit words for grace. For the time being, the subject matter there for today's discussion will be the second of the three yogas, which is known as I rarely speak about it, but today I'm all set. Bhakti. I rarely speak about it because I think it is something that has to be felt, that has to be experienced, that has to be lived. One can speak a lot about karma yoga, how to perform selfless action. One can speak a lot about knowledge, but when it comes to bhakti, when it comes to love, when it comes to devotion, I think that is something that has to be felt and can only be felt. And that is why I think speaking about it too much. What does bhakti yoga, what does the word bhakti in fact mean? As I said when we were going through the three yogas, bhakti is often explained by the masters of the devotional tradition as supreme love. Devotion is a translation in English language, but when a Sanskrit master explains bhakti in more words, this one word in 2 or 3 words, they always use the word parama, prema, which means supreme. Parama means supreme, highest degree, of the highest degree, and prema simply means love. The love of the highest degree. That is how it is generally explained by the masters of the devotional traditions, such as Narada. In the same way, like there is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Patanjali's teachings or threads or aphorisms on yoga, in the same way there are Sage Narada's Bhakti Sutra, which means sutras, aphorisms, threads which thread together all the ideas that are related to bhakti, devotion. So they are the first thing that Patanjali does. He gives the definition of yoga. Atho yoga anushāsanam. Let me start explain yoga, and then he gives his definition of yoga. The same pattern has been followed by Narada and Shandilya, another great master who has also composed another sutra on devotion. Both of them, when they define bhakti, they define it as supreme love, love of highest degree. Literally, grammatically, the word bhakti has been derived from the root bhaj. G becomes K, and then it becomes bhakti. But bhaj, the root, means to serve. Seva, to serve. So bhakti can therefore grammatically, if we look at the grammarian's explanation of the word, then it simply means service. That is the meaning of the word bhakti. However, the most important part of bhakti is the component that it has to do with the heart. And by this I simply mean with feeling. And that's why another word that is used in Sanskrit is bhava. Bhava, which means feelings. So it is deeply emotional in nature. It is not so much active, like karma yoga, which manifests itself totally in action, though it is love in action, but it is action, it is still very active. Jnana, on the other hand, is very intellectual in nature. It is more what we understand by buddhi, the intellect, an understanding, a deeper insight into the nature of reality. But bhakti has that component of bhava, the component of feeling. And this is something that I sadly must say that not Patanjali, but the translators of Patanjali into English language have overlooked. And the reason is that if you look at most of the translations of, for example, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, yoga is the cessation of the chitta. And chitta is always mental modification, mind, and it's always explained, chitta is always explained from a very intellectual, in an intellectual way in English language. It is always translated into English terms, which is deeply intellectual in nature and therefore completely shuts out any emotional aspect to it. At least that is how it seems from the English translations. It is only recently that some scholars, such as, for example, Christopher Wallace, in his discourses on the Yoga Sutras, he makes it clear that it is completely insufficient from a Sanskrit perspective to translate chitta simply as mental modifications, mental fluctuations, the way it has been translated most of the times. What he points out is, and which is completely true, is that the mind for a yogin, the mind for the masters of the Upanishads, was not up here the way we see it today, but it was rather active in this region, and in reality was more active here in this region than in fact up here. And that's why several latest modern translators, very modern translators, by which I mean simply translations which have been prepared within the past 10-15 years, have realized this and have started translating chitta not simply as mental fluctuations, but as mental emotional fluctuations, to include that emotional aspect. Because the mind, the manas, the chitta of a yogin, the chitta of a Vedantin is yes up here, but more here, more what he feels. It is more about that. And I was made aware of this. In fact, I don't know. There was one person in one of my intensives here. She was here during my intensive class only for 1 or 2 days. Usually during the intensive we don't allow newcomers, but she was given special permission as she had asked me, because she was here only for 1 or 2 days. And at the end, she complained that all we talk about is always about the mind, the intellectual mind. What about the emotions? Why we never speak of them? And this really, because this was a feedback, and I always value feedbacks to my talks tremendously, and I really, this deeply unsettled me, this deeply really made me worry that we have left out something so important to human nature. Till then I realized that it is all the way there in the Sanskrit texts. We just have been caught up in the way we have been translating these words into English language. And that is when I became aware. So, and this devotional aspect, or you may call it this supreme love aspect, has been given so much importance in the yogic traditions that it is clearly pointed out that without this sap, without this juice of devotion, without this juice of love, this feeling of love, whether it is action, karma, or whether it is jnana, knowledge, both of them remain completely dry and therefore ultimately meaningless. In fact, knowledge on its own can lead towards a tremendous sense of pride and a strengthening of ego, and that is the one trap that knowledge can lead to, which can only be overcome by cultivating the humbleness that one develops on the devotional path. In fact, Madhusudana Saraswati, who should be credited, this 15th century master from Bengal, approximately the contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the great devotional master of India, whose influence on India in terms of the devotional tradition could not and can most likely never be surpassed by anyone. He was a contemporary, and he originally wanted, in fact, to become a student of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but every time he approached Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was somewhere else, and so he could not meet him, and then he came to Banaras and he became a student there, a scholar, one of the greatest scholars in the Advaita Vedanta, in the non-dualistic Vedanta tradition. And he realizes this little bit lack of devotion in the non-dualistic Vedantic tradition, even though it is there from the time of Shankaracharya, but the tremendous emphasis is more on knowledge. And devotion is just always a means towards that knowledge. But he really then brings the aspect of devotion into the Vedantic, the non-dualistic Vedantic traditions. He really brings the juice. And what he really beautifully points out at his commentary, which is committed to the non-dualistic view of Vedanta, yet he beautifully points out that what renders karma into becoming yoga, what renders jnana, knowledge, into becoming yoga, and into becoming yoga I mean a means to reach that meditative state that we are talking about. That is bhakti, that is devotion. In fact, it is love which transforms action into karma yoga. It is love which transforms knowledge into a means of yoga. It is that love which transforms mere action into a means of meditation, into a means of yoga. So he really points this out, that ultimately this bhakti, this love, is what lies, and that's why it is in between karma and jnana, so that it can enliven both karma on one side, that is the sequence, karma, bhakti and jnana. Bhakti, love, devotion is in between. Like if you have only one lamp, but you want to enlighten 2 rooms, the wisest thing is to do, to place the lamp on the, what is it called? Doorway, yes, in the middle, on the doorway, so that its light spreads and enlightens both rooms. So this is why love has been placed in between. So, now coming back to the sentence here, may Brahman not negate me, which means may I not, literally, brahma nirākarod, may I not be negated. Negated means deserted, forgotten. How does that happen? Is that may the divine not create the circumstances which make me fall again into a state of negligence, forgetfulness, or ignorance. This is basically how the masters, because not to fall into a state of forgetfulness of one's true nature. May it not create such circumstances which force me to fall into a state of forgetfulness of my true essential nature that we have been talking about as part of Jnana Yoga. So, in other words, may the grace of the divine be always with me. Now, let us look at the Sanskrit words for grace, which are often used because they are beautiful words. One word is kṛpā, which is used often and translated as grace in the Sanskrit literature. And kṛpā in Sanskrit simply means capability, capacity, strength. So may I be given the strength. So when we ask for grace, at least in Sanskrit language, what we mean is to have that strength, is to have the capacity to walk on this path. And it is a kind of humbleness to acknowledge that every bit of energy, every bit of strength is given to me from this world around me. I depend completely on this world around me for my strength, for my capacity, for my achievements. So that is one word that is used, and another word is also, which is used in Sanskrit, is also anugraha. Anugraha means to take hold after. Anu means after, and graha means hold. To take hold after. It has that, if you want to understand anugraha, to take hold after, it can be understood in the best way by two examples that the devotional traditions in the 10th century, which came into existence in the 10th century in South India, give as an example, provide, and this is precisely the devotional tradition into which B.K.'s Guruji was born. In his devotional tradition, which is the Sri Vaishnava tradition, there are these two views in respect of grace, in respect of kṛpā, in respect of the strength that a practitioner has. One is the view of the monkey child, and one is the view of the kitten. Literally, that is Markatanyaya, the view of the monkey, and the view of the kitten. And how you can differentiate between both is that the monkey child holds the mother, and the mother carries it. So it is effort on both sides. The child also makes some effort, and the mother also makes some effort. So there is effort on both sides. And then there is the total surrender of a kitten, which completely surrenders itself to the very teeth of the mother, which, if they hold in place of a kitten a mouse, they destroy a mouse completely and shatter it into pieces. Yet, the tremendous faith and total surrender that a kitten has to the same mother, to the same teeth, that is known as marjari nyaya in Sanskrit, which means the way, the surrender that is done like a marjari, like a kitten. There is masters like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the great master of Swami Vivekananda. He used to point out that there are these two views, and both views are fine. But to me it seems that the kitten is safer than a monkey child. And this really happens because I live in the forest, and sometimes it happens that because the monkey holds the mother, it may lose the grip and fall. But when the mother holds the kitten, there is no chance of falling. There the kitten cannot fall because there all the responsibility is in the hands of the mother. A child can fail and thus can fall. But when the total responsibility is in the lap of the mother, then there is no chance of falling. This is what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to point out. So, anugraha, to perceive, to take notice after, or to take hold after. Generally, it is translated as the desire to remove suffering. But I was looking at the very literal, because graha means hold and anu means after. So I was trying to look at. So when we look at these two examples, we can really appreciate the beautiful meaning that the Sanskrit word anugraha has. To me, these two views, from a devotional perspective, in the first one, yes, complete surrender to the divine doesn't mean not to make an effort. That would be a misunderstanding. The idea is to make tremendous effort and yet not to use it as a currency that because I have made this effort, that's why I should be granted its results. I have done my best. That is all I could do, and now I totally surrender myself to the Divine Mother, to Mother Nature, whatever I want to call that supreme divinity, and allow the results to manifest in my life without being attached to them. So, the example of the monkey child is that still that sense of ego that I am doing something, I am working, despite doing all my effort, and this is possible, I can do all my effort and yet not have the sense of pride, the sense of doership, the sense of doing something. This is what we discussed when we were discussing karma yoga. The deepest stage of karma yoga is to give up the sense, even give up the sense of doership. So that is when a practitioner, when a sadhaka, when a seeker makes a tremendous effort, but gives up at the same time the sense of doership and doesn't think that I have done so much. Oh, over the past 10 years, I have performed so much austerity in the higher Himalayan mountains. I have meditated in the forests for 20 years. I've been practicing meditation for 10 years now, you know. Do you know who you are talking to? Someone who has been practicing vipassana. I've been practicing vipassana for 10 years. I've been practicing meditation for 10 years. I've been in silence for 20 years. Wow. I have a problem with that. Do it, overcome it. Don't carry it with yourself. And that is someone who continues to carry it is like that monkey child. And someone who gives it up, does it, finish, done. Move ahead. Again and again the masters, that's the beautiful thing about these masters, do something, then give that up. Then even give that up by which you have given it up, which means the sense of pride, the sense of ego, which results. Tyaja dharmam adharmam cha. Give up good deeds and bad deeds. Ubhe satyandrate tyaja. In the Mahabharata, sage Vyasa is saying to his son that give up truthfulness as well as the tendency of lying. And then, after you have given up both the dichotomies, give that up by which you give them up. Which means the sense of pride, the sense of ego which evolves when we give up. That is again the last trap in giving up. Whenever we give up something, if we carry the ego of giving that up, it would have been better if we would not have given that up. Because that ego is more destructive. The ego of $10,000 that I have given up is more destructive in spiritual terms than those $10,000. They could have been used for a great purpose. But this ego is of no use for anyone. Neither for me, neither for anyone else. That's why it is completely useless. Yes, yet what I see on the path of renunciation again and again is the declaration of how much has been renounced. Sadly, when you speak to people, individuals in the monastic traditions, that is what we come across. And I think that is worse than if they would not have given up. So, that is how I understand this example of the monkey child and the child of a cat, the kitten. In any case, Patanjali, he refers to this Ishvara Pranidhana, to this total surrender to the divine in the first chapter. And he says that this is he uses, not he, but his commentator, Vyasa, uses the word bhakti there, very specific kind of love. It is a very specific kind of devotion, which then, to use his expression, to use Vyasa's expression in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras, which inspires the divine to bend down. Avarjita is the word that has been used, to bend down. And here, the image of a mother to pick up the child has to come like a mother, because a child is incapable even of climbing into the lap of the mother. So the mother, when it sees the child weeping, then it bends down and it supports, it lifts up the child. So it is that aspect that Patanjali and Vyasa there refer to, that Ishvara Pranidhana inspires the divinity to bend down, and then this word anugraha has been used there, that the divine then grants anugraha, by simply meditating on that devotee. So this is a beautiful picture. All devotees meditating on the divine, and the divine, what is the divine meditating on? On the devotees. All the devotees meditating wholeheartedly on the divine, and the divine meditating wholeheartedly on the devotees. The child thinking, all the child thinks about, all the child wants is the mother, and mother supremely loves her child. So I think it is this mutual love from both sides, which is what the word Bhakti points at. And here I must say that even though Patanjali accommodates the idea of atheism, because we have to keep in mind that Patanjali presents yoga in the Sankhya tradition, and Sankhya had these two streams. One stream was atheistic in nature, and Nirishvara Sankhya, godless Sankhya, a stream of Sankhya which did not believe that there is a need to conceptualize God. Or then there was this second stream of Sankhya, Seshvara Sankhya, which sees a need of conceptualizing of the concept of God. And somehow Patanjali, by introducing Ishvara Pranidhana optionally and talking about it before that, talking about supreme effort, he says either make supreme effort. What he says, the context is Tivra Samveganam Asannaha, which means the goal of yoga is closest for someone who has the greatest drive, the greatest inspiration, who makes the greatest effort. And then he says that even there are 3 degrees: great effort, greater effort, and greatest effort. And the one who makes the greatest effort, for him the goal of yoga is the closest. And then he says, or the goal of yoga is closest to someone who has surrendered themselves completely to the divine. So he uses it optionally, which means that he sort of accommodates the idea of atheism into his understanding of yoga, but at the same time also gravitates towards the idea of God, simply, I think, because how to cultivate this love, this universal love, this devotion, this faith in a power that is active in this universe around us without having an idea of God. So, and of course, again, because I'm using here the word God, I'm using here the word divine, the problem with these words is that we understand them always in a very particular cultural context, but from a yogic perspective, God is not somewhere up there, somewhere residing in heaven up there and running things down here, but it is that pure consciousness which resides within the hearts of all beings. So the moment a yogin speaks of Ishvara, he thinks of a principle that resides within the hearts of all living beings. Ishvara, in the concluding chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna beautifully points out, Ishvara, the Lord, resides, Arjuna, within the hearts of all beings. So it is the essence of all our emotions. It is the essence of all our feelings. It is that pure consciousness residing within the depths of each one of our heart. That is what the divine points out. So for me, the way I understand it, that love for the divine simply means love for all. Not love that is, not the kind of love that is directed towards a specific person or a specific entity because I benefit from that entity or because that entity gives joy and happiness to me, but towards all, without any limitation, without any selfish interest. And this is, I think, precisely how the masters understand bhakti, understand devotion, and that's why the masters have, this is in Bhagavata Purana, the masters have spoken of these three categories of devotion. The first category of devotion, which is referred to as the unrefined, basic category of devotion, in which God is seen only in a statue. You only choose a statue as an object of worship. Everything is completely directed, and God is just there in the temple and nowhere outside. But this is a very unrefined, very basic approach towards devotion. Then an intermediate approach of devotion is love for God, friendliness towards the devotees of God, and compassion towards those who are ignorant of God, and forgiveness towards those who hate God. Forgiveness, not persecution. Forgiveness to those who hate my object of worship. That is the second level of devotion. And the third level is to see that divine which resides within my heart equally within all beings, and therefore to be constantly engaged in the well-being of all beings, to use Krishna's words that he uses twice in the 5th chapter as well as the 12th chapter. Such devotion is the highest level of devotion. So when we speak of devotion, it ultimately comes back again to love and to overcome this sense of hatred towards anyone. That's why when he starts describing the emotional aspect, the feeling aspect of devotion in the 12th chapter, Krishna starts his discourse by saying that non-hatred towards all beings, friendliness towards all beings, compassion towards all beings. This is what bhakti means for him in the chapter which is completely dedicated to Bhakti Yoga, the smallest chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, but the most beautiful chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, just 20 verses. So, just to summarize this point once again, that what devotion, what bhakti means to me is when I, as a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga, what it means from a very individual perspective is two things. First of all, tremendous humbleness by the realization that all efforts that I make, they are to the best of my capacity, and my heart tells me, am I making the effort to the best of my capacity or not? I myself, I can judge it. No one can judge it for me. But despite all my human efforts on the physical level, on the verbal level, and even on the intellectual level, my intellect, my understanding, my scope of work, everything is limited. And when I become aware of this limitation, it brings humbleness. When I become aware of the more I become aware of my knowledge, I become proud. But the more I become aware of my ignorance, of all that I don't know, I become humble. And that is why the knowledge of ignorance has been prized as the greatest knowledge in the Advaita Vedanta traditions, in the same way as it was in the case of Socrates. So, first of all, it is about this humbleness of understanding one's limitations, and then love and faith, love for and faith in what we might call Mother Nature, what we want to call Divine Mother. And in fact, just to show you a simple example of what I mean, in every phase of my creation, both forces were deeply at work. I had to make tremendous effort, and there were moments where my effort would have become completely meaningless. It is when then something out there comes down to help me. For example, a few years ago, I saw a very beautiful documentary which I think each one of us should see. It's an anatomical documentary, and really dramatizes what happens before the moment of conception to the sperms, what happens. And the whole journey that these seeds from the father's body into the mother's body till it reaches the egg, the whole journey is utterly amazing, really amazing. If we would just realize what an amazing journey each one of us here sitting has undertaken as part of becoming a human being, the race that we have won, of which the odds were against millions of beings, because there were millions of sperms that raced towards the egg, and it was ultimately only I that made it and reached it, and all other millions of them, against millions of them, all of them got perished. And how the tremendous amount of effort that a sperm has to make to reach the egg, and in some cases how it is helped by the body of the mother. For example, a sperm cannot climb into the uterus, into the cervix, so literally mucus-like threads have to hang down, which work like ladders, which then the sperm can use to climb, to literally climb. So that is what I see as grace. Because there, the sperm cannot do anything, and yet the mother is helping. And it's not even that mother. She doesn't even know what's happening. There is another mother within that mother, which is helping. And like this, a tremendous journey. Then the fallopian tubes, for example, are on two different sides, and the egg is only to come on one side. So the uterus contracts in such a way so that the sperms are sent into that part of the uterus where the egg is most likely to ovulate, most likely to come. And then, when it ultimately reaches the fallopian tube, the nourishment and the rest, because after such a long journey, it is given rest, it is given nourishment for its final phase, which is the most active phase, before it enters the egg, which only then eventually wanders. Look at that documentary, because it tells us, and I was amazed by it initially, because there is one of the Upanishads is known as Garbha Upanishad, fetus Upanishad, the Upanishad of the fetus. And of course, the understanding of that Upanishad is very much ancient, based on very ancient Ayurvedic understanding. I wanted to explore a little bit the modern understanding. And that is when I chanced upon this beautiful documentary, which is tremendously inspiring. So what it shows to me, and then again, what it shows to me is that on one side I have to make a tremendous effort, but then there are also moments when the nature, whatever I want to call her, Mother Nature, Divine Mother, she comes to my rescue. And it is a result of both of the tremendous effort that I have made and the help that I have received from the circumstances around me, from all the people around me, that has made me the person that I am. Not only my hard work, but everybody else has helped me tremendously to become the person that I am. And being thankful to the divine simply means to be thankful to everyone in this world for being the person that I am today. That is ultimately what I understand by Bhakti Yoga, what I understand by devotion. And this was one of the key teachings that my father, as he traveled with me on foot through different parts of India, without money. I used to hide a little bit of money without him knowing it in my socks or shoes or something like this. But he really wanted us, by us I mean my mother as well as me. She continued to be with us on these journeys up to I was 16, and then when I was 16 she thought that now he's old enough to undertake such journeys on his own. And sadly also she had then her first big accident, after which it was impossible for her to undertake these journeys anymore. But they were tirthayatras, they were pilgrimages for him, but not pilgrimages with a specific destination in mind, but completely oriented to the process itself and learning how to live on the sustenance provided by the society, by the love of people who love you simply not for a selfish purpose, not because you are going to give them anything, but simply because they love, because they have this tendency to love, they have this natural tendency to welcome, to completely depend on this aspect. And something that I find very amazing is that if we did not get food for the whole day and had to sleep the whole night without having food, what happened without any exception is that next day morning we used to get breakfast. And if I would ask the person, we would just be walking on our street and suddenly somebody comes and says, would you like to have breakfast at my home? I said, okay, why not? We haven't eaten anything yesterday, so let's go and have breakfast. And then later on, after we have had our breakfast at his home, then I asked them several times that, why did you call us for breakfast? He said, well, I was just sitting, I had my breakfast, I was sitting in the veranda and I saw you passing, and there was this voice from within that I should call you for breakfast, I should ask you for breakfast. And that's what I did. That's when my father used to say that it is this voice that I want you to have faith in. This voice, now you can call it the voice of God, you can call it the voice of humanity, you can call it humanity, whatever you want to call it. That's for us. There is no disagreement with names and designations, but there is something which inspires humans to do something great. I think that when we were speaking about swaha, that inner voice of greatness, mightiness, to have faith in that voice, to have total blind faith in that voice. And I think if I have met anybody in my life who has that blind faith in that caretaking nature of the divine, then it is my father. And that is why one thing that he never does is that he never worries. He simply never worries. Something that I've never seen him doing. Despite all reasons of being worried, he is now blind. He's now old, 86 years old, completely blind, has lost his eyes. I remember when he was in the process of losing his eyes, there were no worries then. He knew he will be taken care of. Today, he knows he will be taken care of. He has total faith, and it is a blind, completely illogical faith that he will be taken care of. But miraculously, that faith has always turned out to be true till today. And he's 86 years old. That is amazing. And I think that complete faith is what I understand as love for and faith in that sustaining power. And that is ultimately what Vishnu in the Trinity, Brahma is the creative power, Vishnu is the sustaining power, and Rudra is the destroying power, to have this tremendous faith in the power, in the world's power, in the universe's power, in the Mother Nature's power, in God's power to sustain, to have tremendous faith in that. That is what frees us from our worries. So we'll come back to this discussion a little bit more. And then we will continue for what has to be done to cultivate such a state. So hope the connection with peace becomes clear. Devotion, bhakti, is a way to overcome one's worries. The biggest fire that really burns us every moment of our life. And that's why it is an important component of finding peace within oneself. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yes.
You mentioned in the beginning the word bhajan.
Bhajan, yes.
Which the bhakti means.
Yes, the root, yes.
In fact, that is service.
Service.
But does it also mean to sing the glory?
Yeah,
To sing the glory?
Yes, yes. In strictly speaking, in Sanskrit, the word would be kirtana. Kirtana is singing the glory. Now, bhajana is sort of, because bhajana can also mean devotion, and it's a kind of a Hindi appropriation of what's in Sanskrit. In the same way, like I point out, chinta in Sanskrit simply means to think, but in Hindi it means to worry, and in Indonesian it means to love. Cinta, aku cinta Bali, I love Bali. Aku cinta Indonesia, I love Indonesia. In Hindi, cinta means to worry. Originally in Sanskrit it simply means to think. Now you can think in a negative way, you can think in a positive way. The Indonesians took the positive meaning, and so they limited the meaning. The same is in the case of bhajan, the way we use it in Hindi language. That bhajana simply means service, devotion, the feeling of love, but it has then been contextualized for, and now it in fact, you can even not in Hindi, you cannot use it for kirtan, but you use it for very specific devotional songs. So if you are just singing the name of God, the name of Krishna or the name of Rama, that's not called bhajan, that is called kirtan. But bhajan is when you sing songs in local languages, vernacular languages, devotional songs in Varna. So it has a very specific context, which obviously does not exist in Sanskrit language.
No, I meant the word bhaja, not bhajan.
Yes, bhaja. Yes.
Like the book Bhaja Govinda.
Bhaja Govinda. Serve Govinda. Yes. Yes.
Usually it's translated as sing the
No,
glory of
no.
Govinda.
It's bhaja. The very grammatical meaning provided by Pāṇini is bhaja sevaya. Bhaja is in the sense of seva. So bhaja govindam, sarv govinda, sarv govinda, sarv govinda. Yes. That's of course, because this service of Govinda is done in so many ways, and it is also done because there are 9 types of bhaktis. Smaranam, kirtanam, Vishnu. There the word kirtana has been used in the sense of bhajana. So singing the glory of Govinda is also a kind of bhakti, is also a kind of bhajana. Therefore, it is fine to translate it that way. that sing the glory of Govinda, but that would limit bhakti just to one aspect of it. There are 9 aspects of bhakti: to listen the glory, to sing the glory, smaranam, kirtanam, Vishnu, vandanam, padasevan, shravanam. Yes, that's where I made the mistake. Shravanam, kirtanam, Vishnu, smaranam, padasevanam, archanam, vandanam, dasyam, sakhyam, ātmani. Maybe we can talk about this in our next session. The 9 types of bhaktis, the Navadha bhakti, the 9 types of bhaktis. This is just one aspect. Singing the glory of the divine is just one aspect of these 9. Yes.
I wanted to ask about surrender. So you presented the 2 analogies, one the kitten and one the monkey. And correct me if I misunderstood, but you mentioned that the kitten analogy, that was a higher form of surrender.
I would see it that way, yes, because there is total surrender there.
Okay, so in my understanding, bhakti requires faith and it requires surrender. So in the kitchen analogy, there's unwavering faith.
Unwavering faith.
But in the monkey analogy, there's the do your best, but in a
Yes.
real karma yoga sense.
Yes.
Without the anugraha,
Yes.
without the attachment to the
That is precisely what I said the kitten analogy leads to. Because in the monkey analogy is seen as still some ego that you are grasping. That ego aspect is there. That is how I understand the monkey analogy. Yes.
If the grasping is in a non-detached,
Yes.
without ego,
Yes.
way, and
Yes.
I'm doing my best, giving the rest.
Yes.
So that kind of surrender.
Yes.
Then the faith and the surrender can go hand in hand.
Completely. That's precisely the point that I was trying to make, is that complete surrender doesn't mean not, and I said it, that complete surrender doesn't mean to give up all one's actions, but it simply means what we talked about earlier, to give up the sense of doership of those actions, the sense of ego, pride, that I am doing these actions ultimately.
And in fact, bhakti requires the kitten and the monkey.
Yes, initially the monkey and then ultimately the kitten. Yes, yes. But that is the highest. To me, that seems to be the highest analogy. Even though within the devotional tradition there, this caused the split between the 2 traditions within Ramanuja. One of them were completely committed to the monkey analogy, the other were completely committed to the kitten analogy.
Also, I have a question related to the kṛpā.
Yes.
You said it's like the strength, like the complete achievements. But the previous week we also been talking about the Shraddha Virya. Is also to understand as a Virya, this kind of strength, or only
Virya, yes. Here it is more. The question was that because I explained kṛpā as strength, is it somehow similar to virya that we talked about when we were speaking of bala initially? I think virya is actual strength and kṛpā has more the sense of potential in it. So there is slight difference. Capability. The root krip in Sanskrit grammar means capability, to become capable. So we are granted the capabilities. By grace is meant that we are granted the capability to cultivate wisdom. Let's see it like this. So it's that capability, all the circumstances which conduce towards overcoming our ignorance, in a way, that sense. So it's not only direct strength, but it is capability.
willpower also, that you really want.
One can explain it further in many ways. means. But samarthya, samartha means capable. So samarthya is capability. Grace manifests in the form of manifesting the capability, the capacity to walk on this life. And that is why how I see it on my path on yoga is that I make efforts, I do everything that I can do, and then I realize that there is always something that seems so impossible for me to overcome, such as several human emotions. It seems like it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible, and yet in that moment when I feel that now this has become completely impossible, my own anger, my own lust, my own hatred, I have done everything that I could do, and yet it creeps up. That is where then I seek for guidance. I seek for grace. I ask that, give me please the strength to overcome this. I want to overcome this, and yet I can't. Give me the strength. Give me the capability. Give me the capacity. That is when my last resort is prayer. To overcome all these negative emotions which creep up again and again. How to overcome them? As a human being, they are so much natural part of my being that I can speak of as much knowledge as possible, but the moment somebody says Siddhartha is stupid, something starts brewing. Something starts coming up. And there I become utterly helpless. That is where I say that now I need strength from you. I need strength. I need you to pass down the ladder to me so that I can climb beyond this and not be affected by it. Just step above. And once you step beyond it, it's left behind and then it's gone. It's just those few moments when it comes up. They are the most challenging ones. If you surrender there, my father always says that when the wave comes, if you stand up against it, it will throw you back. Just bow down to it, it passes over. It's precisely the same with the emotion, with our emotions. Okay. Let us come back to this discussion again on Saturday. We'll conclude with a prayer for universal well-being. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग्